Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. Parliament hasn't functioned for a single day since it started, and now there are genuine fears that perhaps the entire monsoon session could be washed out. Meanwhile, the divide between the government and the opposition has only widened. The opposition is insisting on resignations before a debate, whilst Rahul Gandhi has called Sushma Swaraj a criminal. In response, Nitin Gadkari has demanded an apology and even threatened criminal defamation. So tonight we ask, what do our politicians believe they've achieved? Do they care about the damage to Parliament and democracy? And most importantly, are there no other better ways of making the government accountable, or is disruption the only alternative in India? At the end of a depressing week, those are the questions that are crying out for an answer. My guests are Congress spokesperson and MP Gaurav Gogoi, Akali Dal MP Naresh Gujral, Biju Janata Dal MP Jay Panda, CPI MP D Raja, BJP spokesperson Sambit Patra, and the well-known and highly regarded journalist Akar Patel. Mr. Raja, Parliament hasn't functioned for a single day this week. In contrast, as Shashi Tharoor has pointed out, for 300 years, the British House of Commons has never been disrupted even once. Yours is one of the parties that is at the forefront of holding up the functioning of Parliament. So let me ask you, what do you think the opposition has achieved by not permitting the two houses to function even for a minute?
Definitely, it is a very valid question. It can be asked to the government also, what government has achieved by not allowing the Parliament to function. Because to run the Parliament is not the responsibility of parties in opposition alone. The primary responsibility lies with the government. Why government has taken such an adamant position on certain concerns expressed by the parties in opposition? When I say opposition, it is not a solid opposition bloc. There is convergence of positions, and independent of what Congress has been doing, the left has been raising issues. Independent of what left has been doing,
yes, but the net result is Parliament hasn't functioned. And what I'm asking you is, what do you think you've achieved by holding up Parliament? What have you achieved today?
I am not holding the Parliament not to function. In fact, my party, the left parties, are demanding that Parliament should function for minimum 100 days in a year.
No, forgive me, Sitaram Yechurys is on record on saying that until there are resignations, there will be no debate, there will be no functioning. And what I'm asking you is, what do you think you've achieved by that position?
Again, that is what I'm saying. Parliament has certain responsibilities. In a parliamentary democracy, what Dr. Ambedkar has said, constitutional morality must be upheld, and that is on what we have been fighting. Where is the constitutional morality?
You bring up the issue of constitutional morality. Let me bring in Mr. Gogoi. Mr. Gogoi, morality is a very important point. But Parliament, do you know, costs 2.5 lakhs a minute. It costs 9 crore a day, and already 36 crore has been wasted. And I ask you, India at the end of the day, despite our pretensions, is a poor country. That money can be usefully used for health and education and infrastructure for the poor. What have you achieved by frittering it away over 4 days?
Karan, I'm surprised at your question, because it seems, by the logic of your argument, that the opposition is holding the Parliament to ransom. On the contrary, it is the ruling party's stubbornness to act against the guilty and those who are accused, which is why we are at this stage. If you remember the previous session, we had an extremely productive Parliament in which both the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha worked more than 100%
Just a moment. Before you go further, can I point this out to you? The government is willing to debate. Sushma Swaraj is willing to participate. It's your refusal to participate in the debate that is holding up Parliament. How can you say the government is to blame when it's your insistence on resignations as a precondition that is the problem?
I think it is very necessary to understand what the opposition parties are demanding. They are demanding action against those who are guilty and accused of a gross abuse of authority and helping criminals in the case of Mrs. Sushma Swaraj. B, again, abusing the authority of office and helping known criminals in the case of Mrs. Vasundhara Raje, Chief Minister of Rajasthan.
Now forgive me, when you say known criminals, I have to stop you, because these are not people with cases even, leave aside being found guilty. Be careful of the way you use language to describe Lalit Modi. You could find yourself with a defamation
suit. Would you want the
suit.
opposition parties to remain silent and submissive?
Let me bring in Sambit Patra. Sambit Patra,
Would you want the opposition parties to remain silent and submissive and mute spectators?
Well,
I don't think so. That is why the people have brought us to the parliament.
All right. Let me bring in Sambit Patra. Sambit Patra, are you embarrassed by the fact that Sitaram Yechurys has cited the BJP as the precedent for what is happening in parliament today? And the truth is, in 2011, the BJP didn't let the winter session function for even 1 second. Worse still, Arun Jaitley actually provided the justification for this sort of behavior when he said obstruction is a legitimate parliamentary tactic. Today, your logic, your precedent is being used against you. So are you embarrassed?
Karan, first let me ask the second question. And the second question that you threw at me was what Mr. Arun Jaitley had rightly stated, that obstructionism is a legitimate method of, or legitimate tool of parliamentary democracy. Well, yes, obstructionism and disruption is one of the tools. But just remember, it is one of the tools and it is the last option. As I was in one of your last programs pointing out, that of the 5 Ds, that is discussion, debate, dissent, decision, disruption is the 5th D. So the 5th option should not be exercised as the first option. Have in fact the Congress and the other opposition parties exercised the first 4 options? That is, have they agreed to debate? Have they discussed? Have they in fact disagreed and then finally reached a decision that they today talk of disruption? No. Now coming to the first part of the question you asked me was, there was a precedent from BJP's way of functioning. I would say this is a very kindergarten way of answering things, that you did something, so we will do in a similar way.
Oh, you forget, Sambit Patra, that parliaments all over the world function on the basis of precedent. You can't forget it when the precedent is being used against you.
Karan, I'm answering that. Very patiently I'm answering that, Karan. Of the 10 years that the country saw under Manmohan Singh ji, it was only twice, once in 2010 and thereafter in 2012, that we had so-called way disrupted the parliament. And why had we in fact taken obstructionism as a way of disruption? Because of the fact that 1.76 lakh crore, 2.86
well, there are compelling arguments on both sides. Don't present your argument and make it seem as if the opposition don't have an equally compelling argument this time round. You're being too clever by half. Akar Patel, let's focus on in fact the explanation given by Sitaram Yechurys for the obstruction of parliament to this program last night. Because in a situation where both sides are blaming each other, it's important to understand whether Mr. Yechurys' justification has validity. This is what he says. He says, the primary duty of a legislature is to make the executive accountable. Secondly, in the present circumstances, he claims accountability means ensuring an investigation into Lalit Gate and the Vyapam scams. Thirdly, he says, for that investigation to be free, fair and objective, the ministers must step aside. And since the government is not agreeing to any of this at the moment, he believes holding up parliament is a legitimate tactic in this circumstance. Otherwise, parliament can't make the executive accountable. Now, in your eyes, is that a legitimate argument?
It's not legitimate, but it's extremely effective. I think it's very good politics for a bunch of parties in the opposition, the largest of whom is 44 seats, to be able to do this. There is a high tolerance for this sort of nonsense in our country, and I think both the media and the population in general don't have a problem with disruption. I don't think we have the traditions that you spoke of earlier, Black Rod and all of that. What we do have, there is a parliamentarian in Britain called Dennis Skinner of the Labour Party, who makes himself a nuisance every so often and comes into the news because of that. I think this is a tactic. It has become a strategy, but it is basically a tactic that most of our parties follow in parliament. I think it would be wrong to blame the BJP for having done it a few years ago. This is very old. It goes back at least 30-35 years. I see it as being very sensible politics. I think that this is the only way that parties like the Congress, with very poor speakers like Mr. Rahul Gandhi, can get into the news. The reason that we are debating this today, all of us, is because I think it's a sensible, effective tactic. Is it legitimate? No.
All right, that's a very interesting point to make. Very quickly, I'm going to go to Gaurav Gogoi to get him to respond. You've just heard Akar Patel say this is not a legitimate tactic, but it is the only way a party with poor speakers like Rahul Gandhi can get into the news. In other words, it's the poor quality of your parliamentary talent that is forcing you to resort to disruption. Had you better speakers, had you better quality talent, you would have been able to take on the government in debate. How do you respond to that?
I think we're losing the focus of the debate.
Well, no, respond to his question before you start changing the focus to suit yourself. Respond to what Akar Patel said.
That there needs to be.
Respond to Akar Patel.
Let me just quickly reaffirm. With Mr. Akar Patel, I think, he is entitled to his personal opinion. But as a Congress party, we have always said, under the leadership of Sonia ji and Rahul ji, whether outside or inside, we will make the ruling party accountable. And that's where I agree with what Mr. Yechurys said, that the legislator has to make the executive accountable. But what we have seen in the case of Sushma Swaraj, that she is bypassing government controls, not letting bureaucrats and top officials within her own ministry, keeping them in the dark, while helping someone
we'll
such
come
as
to Sushma in a moment time. I will come to the specific charge against Sushma Swaraj in a moment's time. I want to stick first to the broad point about whether the tactic you're using is legitimate, justified or unwarranted. So let's stick to that for a moment. Let me bring in Naresh Gujral. Naresh Gujral, I want to stick for a moment to this big broad issue before we come to Sushma in more specific detail. I want to put this to you. In any other country, propriety and decency and honor alone would have demanded that Shivraj Singh Chauhan, Vasundhara Raje Scindia and Sushma Swaraj would have voluntarily stepped aside. In India, however, they've dug in their heels. Doesn't that mean that actually it's the government's obduracy and refusal to do the honourable and decent thing that is the cause for paralysis in Parliament? The opposition is left with no choice to have to obstruct.
Current Sitaram Yechurys said that it's the opposition's role to hold the government accountable. I totally agree with him. But how do you make the government accountable? Which is the supreme forum of accountability? It is the parliament. Why are they shying away from debate and discussion in the parliament? I agree with them that they must hold the government accountable. But if they have cogent arguments, if they have some evidence, let them produce that in parliament, let them debate, let the whole country see, and then the country will decide whether the government or Mrs. Sushma Swaraj or the gentlemen that you've named, are they accused or not? How can these people decide that they are the accused, but they have already, the verdict has already been given that they must go, without giving a chance to either the concerned minister or the Prime Minister or other ministers to speak for the government. Now this policy of shoot and scoot, outside on the television, you give a 1-minute interview and then you don't back it up with any cogent arguments, that is not going to work. They must come to Parliament, let Parliament function, let them nail the government if they have strong evidence.
Okay. Let me, Jay Panda, put the opposite view to you. You've just heard Naresh Gujral, who's an ally of the BJP, say that the way to make the government accountable is through debate on the floor of the House. The problem is that for the last 4 or 5 weeks since the Lalit Gate scandal first broke, this government hasn't been open, this government hasn't been transparent. Instead, it's been defensive, it's been silent, and it's refused to, in fact, answer press questions about the charges being discussed. Do you think that if the government had been different in its response, willing to engage with the press, willing to answer questions, the opposition response in Parliament would have been different, the atmosphere in the two houses would have been different?
I think there is some merit in this argument, but two wrongs don't make a right. The problem on the government side is threefold. First of all, in opposition, they themselves did exactly what they are now accusing the many opposition parties of doing. Secondly, you've just pointed out that they seem to have been stonewalling without responding to any of the allegations in a rational manner, such as setting up an inquiry or any such thing. And thirdly, even while they are asking some opposition parties not to disrupt, many government members have been holding placards and rushing into the well, as has happened in Parliament. So they do not have the moral high ground. But at the same time, you know, for example, we in the opposition, the Biju Janata Dal, we are equally shocked by these allegations, and we do want some decisive action to be taken. But it is irrational to say that hangings must take place first and then the trial must take place. So although we are insistent on action, we are not making it a precondition. We want a debate to happen, discussion to happen. And this is where many in the opposition, I think, are self-defeating. Okay. And in terms of whether this is effective or not, it depends on how you define effectiveness. If your overall objective is to stop the government from functioning at any cost, then yes. But I don't think that's what people have sent us here. People have sent us here to be a check and balance on the government, to hold them accountable, to put them on the back foot on the floor of the House.
You know, there was a very important challenge there, Mr. Raja, that was thrown at you, as well as at Mr. Gogoi, by Naresh Gujral. Naresh Gujral accepts that it is the duty of the legislature to make the executive accountable, but what he's questioning is the method of how you make that executive accountable. What you've chosen to do is to disrupt Parliament and force accountability that way. An alternate would have been to agree to a debate, shame the government through the force of your arguments, and thus force the resignations you want. That way, not only would Parliament have functioned, but you'd have had public opinion behind you. Why haven't you chosen that alternative?
Karan, you are right. There should be debate. But debate must be very meaningful, structured one. As long as the accused or alleged are holding the position, do you think the debate will be very meaningful and structured?
Why not?
And outside Parliament,
if Mrs.
do you
Swaraj
think there
is
will
prepared
be
to engage in the debate, why won't it be meaningful? She'll make a statement, you can tear it apart if you want thereafter. The whole country will watch and listen and learn.
Karan, I must bring what you have said just a minute earlier. For the last 1 month, the media, both electronic and print media, has been discussing all these scams, whether it is Lalit Gate or Vyapam or some other corruption cases. Media has been discussing, and all facts, all evidences were brought to the public domain by media, and media was challenging government and concerned people. You refute or you accept the responsibility. And in case of Srimati Sushma Swaraj, she has admitted she has helped an economic offender. It is a fact. She herself has admitted. Now the question is, those who are being accused and holding the position does not suit or does not in tune with the constitutional morality that on which our constitution stands. And constitution demands that legislature should make the government accountable, answerable to the people. And what is accountability? That's
Absolutely.
what
I'm going to stop you there, Mr. Raja, because I want to bring in Gaurav Gogoi on that important point, because the same argument also is one that applies to Congress. You know, Mr. Gogoi, no one denies that it is the job of the legislature to make the executive accountable. The question is how. You've chosen to do it by disruption. You could have done it very effectively by engaging in a debate, winning the argument and shaming the government. After all, I concede that the government has a superb debater in Arun Jaitley, but look at the strength of the combined opposition. You've got Sitaram Yechurys, Jairam Ramesh, Anand Sharma, Derek O'Brien, Sharad Yadav, Mayawati, Mani Shankar Iyer, not to mention the two of you, D. Raja and Gaurav Gogoi. You could have, excuse my colloquialism, hammered the government. Why have you denied yourself that opportunity by refusing to debate?
Karan, the ruling government has already set a precondition for the debate, which when their parliamentary minister has said nothing immoral or illegal has been done. So they have already declared prior to a debate that the ministers have done nothing wrong. In fact, some of their representatives say that these are media-created scandals.
Just a moment.
Manufactured
you don't expect them to go into a debate saying, hands up, we've committed a crime. It's their right and prerogative to say we've done nothing wrong. It's your task in that debate to prove they have. Why are you shying away from that task?
So they are not. Karan, we are not shying away from the debate. But if they are using a debate just to wash away the sins, and they are not willing to even self-introspect, we have already seen evidence of that. The Prime Minister chooses to remain silent.
Okay.
The representatives call that nothing immoral or illegal has been done. So when they have already, after 1 month
the
of
silence on the part of the Prime Minister may be inexplicable, bizarre, perhaps even indefensible, but it is his prerogative to be silent. You can't force a man to speak if he doesn't want to. And remember, Dr. Manmohan Singh used silence as a tactic. Why can't Mr. Modi copy his predecessor?
Well, Mr. Modi should therefore declare that I am only going to tweet when I am on foreign tours, but on issues of national importance, when a central minister helps an economic offender, when in a state when 50 people are dying, I will choose to remain silent.
All right. You're now being rhetorical and polemical and nothing more.
His credibility or his tweets will remove.
Although I concede you have a right to be rhetorical if you want. Let me bring in Sambit Patra. I want to focus Sambit Patra on Sushma Swaraj specifically,
in the parliament,
because yesterday Rahul Gandhi actually called her a criminal. His exact words were, she had committed a criminal act. In the evening on this program, Abhishek Singhvi, not just a Congress MP and a spokesman, but a leading lawyer himself, specified to us what was the criminal act Mrs. Swaraj was guilty of. He says that she has breached Section 13(1)(d)(3) of the Prevention of Corruption Act. Now, you're an official spokesman for the party that Mrs. Swaraj belongs to. How do you respond to that charge?
First and foremost, not going to the technicality, which I'll do in the second part of my answer. If they have concrete evidence of criminality of the act done by Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, then more is the reason they have with them as to why they should come and what you use the word hammer the government. Because if you have such compelling evidences, why not put those evidences on the floor of the parliament? Let the world, let the country visualize it.
Charge she's guilty of Section 13(d)(1)(3) of the Prevention of Corruption Act. It was officially made by Abhishek Singhvi yesterday.
I will answer that. But my challenge to Congress is, if such are the compelling evidences, then they should put it on the floor of the parliament, press charges, and thereafter move ahead. They do not have such. That's the reason as to why they have stepped back.
What about the specific charge?
Secondly,
you keep
as far
as
the technicalities are concerned,
it's not a technicality, it's a charge.
The section that you are mentioning mentions that pecuniary benefits.
No, it doesn't.
Pecuniary benefits or valuables have to be given. But have to be received by the office in position.
No,
over here, that has not been established.
All right,
let
me bring in an independent voice, neither from the opposition nor from the government and its allies, Akar Patel. As an independent person, Akar Patel, I'm going to read to you what Section 13(1)(d)(3) of the Prevention of Corruption Act says. It's a very simple sentence. A public servant is said to commit the offence of criminal misconduct if he, while holding office as a public servant, obtains for any person any valuable thing without any public interest. Arguably, a British travel document is a very valuable thing, and arguably no public interest whatsoever is served by helping Lalit Modi get one. Now, in your eyes as an independent, is Sushma Swaraj guilty of that, as Rahul Gandhi and Abhishek Singhvi claimed yesterday? Or is she owed an apology from Rahul Gandhi by Nitin Gadkari, as he said today?
I would say yes, that the charge is proven without doubt.
The charge is proven without doubt. You're as blunt and certain as that. I'm asking you for confirmation.
The way that you read it out to me, I don't think there are two ways about it. I think what she's done, she is guilty of doing. The defense of the BJP is that it doesn't constitute a crime. The words in the sequence that you read them out seemed to indicate without any kind of ambiguity that what she did was wrong. I think for the BJP to not even accept its wrongness is, it's frankly puzzling to me. I think their hope was that the parties would move on to another scandal or something else would come up and this would die down. It's not. I think it was up to the BJP recognizing that this was the only tactic that was available to a rump of parties. They should have done something to assuage their feelings. The fact that they've chosen not to, I think it smacks of, frankly, arrogance. I think that they believed that their 282 seat majority would push them through the session. It's not. It's a failing.
One other quick question. I'll ask you for another short, sharp, unequivocal answer. Your opinion suggests that Rahul Gandhi has not erred when he said Sushma Swaraj had committed a criminal act. Am I right?
I think he's right in saying it. There is no question that he's not, the phrasing is not offensive. When the government refuses to look at the charge and in many way possible, including in parliament, he is completely within his rights to say it.
Naresh Gujral, you're an ally of the BJP, but you are also an independent thinking person with a mind of your own, and I know that you are someone who's never hesitated to speak the truth, even if your ally, the BJP, doesn't like it. I'm going to read to you once again Section 13(1)(d)(3) of the Prevention of Corruption Act. Bear in mind that you've just heard Akar Patel say that he believes Sushma Swaraj is guilty of it. I'm going to ask you the same question. This is what it says. A public servant is said to commit the offence of criminal misconduct if he, while holding office as a public servant, obtains for any person any valuable thing without any public interest. Arguably, a British travel document, as I put it, is a very valuable thing. No public interest whatsoever is served by helping Lalit Modi get one. Do you accept Akar Patel's judgment? Do you agree that in fact Mrs. Swaraj is guilty of breaching this?
I'm afraid I don't agree with that at all. At best, you can accuse her of error of judgment. She, as foreign minister, on compassionate grounds, was trying to help a lady who was suffering from cancer. There was no pecuniary gain as far as she was concerned or her family was concerned. So there was no financial gain to her or her family.
That doesn't need to be under Section 13(1)(d)(3). It doesn't require pecuniary gain.
If whatever opposition is saying, if it was so clear, 3 weeks ago they could have gone to court. Why? They refuse to come to parliament. Let them go to court if it's so clear. But they know that it's not open and shut case, so that's why they're not going to the courts.
I'm going to bring in Jay Panda, because Jay Panda, this is a critical point. It's an issue of dispute between the BJP in the shape and form of Nitin Gadkari, who's demanded an apology from Rahul Gandhi. He's threatened against Rahul Gandhi if that apology doesn't come. It's also an important point from the point of view of Mr. Gandhi, because they believe this not only proves that Sushma Swaraj has acted criminally, it proves that resignations must precede the debate. Where do you stand on that critical point? Is she guilty of breaching 13(1)(d)(3)?
Well, I'm also guided by the fact that certain eminent lawyers, former advocate generals and solicitors have spoken up saying that that is not the case. So I don't want to pass a judgment just on air based on a section of the law that you have read out, which is why I think it is important to have debate in parliament. And I can understand this disruption if the government were not willing to answer these charges on the floor of the parliament, or if Mrs. Swaraj was not willing to respond to it. But considering that she wants to respond, I think she should be given a chance to say things in her defense. Now, this is not to condone anything yet. It may or may not be criminal. Even if it is not criminal, it could be wrong in some other sense. And that may not be politically acceptable. But I don't want to pass judgment, certainly not in a TV debate. I want this to be an in-depth discussion in Parliament, which is why we are there.
I want to go back very quickly to Akar Patel. Akar Patel, you heard Naresh Gujral say that he didn't agree with you, but he accepted that Mrs. Swaraj had made what he called an error of judgment. What doesn't an error of judgment inevitably lie behind when you make a criminal breach of the law? It is an error of judgment that leads you to do it, isn't it?
No, I think that we ought to dismiss that line. There are very clearly established commercial links between the Swaraj family and the person who has been named. Mr. Modi, for us to assume that this is rather, you know, a mistake. It might well have been, but the thought of removing all notion of pecuniary interests from this and to make it non-transactional is, I think, bogus, because there is a demonstration of the facts. The family has benefited from his benevolence, has been given money, he has employed her husband as his lawyer. So for us to say this is a mistake, I think is wrong. It is absolutely clear as the crystal.
Sambit Patra, you represent the party from which Mrs. Swaraj comes. It's only fair that you should have a chance to speak on her behalf. Now, it's not just that she's being accused of breaching Section 13(1)(d)(3). She's also being accused of conflict of interest because she acted to help a man who was her daughter's client and her husband's client. And you could say that she is also being accused of quid pro quo because a year earlier, her husband wrote to Lalit Modi asking for help for his nephew. So when Lalit Modi a year later requested help for himself, it was just asking to return the favor. How do you defend Mrs. Swaraj against the charge of corruption, the charge of conflict of interest, the charge of quid pro quo?
Number one, Karan, you began your question by saying that since you belong to the party of Mrs. Swaraj, how do you defend Mrs. Swaraj? I would say, why do I need to when Mrs. Swaraj herself is ready to keep her case in front of the country on the floor of the Parliament? And Parliament is most sacrosanct. She is ready to put her own case. Why doesn't the opposition allow that to be done? Now, secondly, as far as the case of Sushma Swaraj is concerned, I have always maintained this is not a case of corruption. It is a case of compassion, and at best, what the opposition has been saying that it is a misplaced compassion, which we say no, it is not a misplaced compassion. It was a compassion shown to the wife of an offender. The wife was not an offender, remember, she was a cancer patient. So wife and husband are different entities. Let us not mix these two entities. As far as the employability of her daughter and her husband is concerned, I firmly maintain that there is right of employability of politicians' spouses as well. There are only few families, the Gandhi family being number one, who are not employed anywhere, yet they maintain a lavish life.
That was a very cleverly delivered dig. I'll compliment you for that, but I'll also point out that this confusion between compassion and corruption is intriguing. It suggests that all alms giving must have some sort of strange motive behind it. Parliament. Gaurav Gogoi, let's come to how the people of India view the way politicians, both government and the opposition, are holding up the functioning of Parliament. Many people believe that when the opposition refuses to agree to a debate, even though the government is willing to indulge in it, this is undemocratic. Many people believe it's actually simply wrong, because Parliament exists to debate, it exists to discuss. And they feel that the opposition is undermining the very raison d'etre of Parliament. How do you respond to that popular concern?
Karan, I understand the concern of the public. They were concerned in 2010 when BJP disrupted the parliament for close to 80 hours. They were concerned in the winter session in 2012 when the BJP disrupted over 100 hours. So I'm assuming the public wants us to function like the way the Congress did in the opposition in the last session, where we worked over 100% of our time in Lok Sabha and Rajasthan.
So then why don't you function like that?
At the same time, people are also concerned that have we reached an age, have we reached a time where a minister's family members are employed with an economic offender?
Let's stick to responding to popular concern. Let's not go backwards into discussions we've already had.
The public
are you dismissing this public concern that you're being undemocratic and you're behaving badly?
Not at all. Not at all. But the public, remember, in 2014 Lok Sabha election, voted for Prime Minister Modi because he promised na khaunga na khane dunga. So they are seeing a Prime Minister who is silent. They are seeing a government who is defending Mrs. Sushma Swaraj. And if one were to hear Sambit Patra's argument, then it would seem that the government is also defending Lalit Modi. Have we reached an age where the government will go out of its way to help economic offenders? Is this the Achhe Din that the BJP government promised? So
Mr. Raja, a second element of public concern arises from the attitude of the opposition particularly the left parties and the Congress have adopted, which is to say we will not indulge in debate until there are resignations. And people say this is arrogance. This is a bit like saying there's only one way forward, it's my way, and I insist upon it. Do you realize that you're conveying arrogance to the Indian people?
I do not agree with you. People do understand our position, and people do understand the position of the government. If you ask me, people think government is arrogant, government is adamant, government doesn't want to concede anything that parties in opposition are raising. You have agreed, and the independent voice we heard, and Srimati Sushma Swaraj is guilty of our action. Whether it has been done on humanitarian ground or otherwise, I do not agree with that argument, error of judgment. She is one of the experienced ministers in the government, and she knows what she does.
But what about the charge that you are being arrogant? What about the charge that you are being arront in demanding resignations?
We are not arrogant. We are for debate. No, we are not arrogant. We want debate, and we are democratic. What we say, those alleged to be involved in corrupt practices, those who are accused must step down and ensure a meaningful structured debate in Parliament outside a fair trial. This is what fair inquiry into all the allegations. This is what we say.
Samit Patra, let me bring you in. For many people, there is a real danger that the entire monsoon session could be lost. And they fear that this could happen because it's actually happened before. What does the government propose to do to ensure that this outcome is averted? Or are you either helpless or unwilling to act because the price is too much?
No, I would say that the word helpless would be a very dangerous word if a government with absolute majority, with majority, with 282 seats, as Akar was pointing out, would appear helpless to the country. And as I had repeated in one of your shows, the famous saying.
So what are you going to do to avert the monsoon session
the party must be, as I assume, the party must be in talks with all the opposition party, and party has always maintained that we are ready to talk. We are ready to discuss, we are ready to debate, and these are the basis on which democracy functions. We are ready to accommodate as well, because on all the bills of importance...
What sort of accommodation have you got in mind?
No. As far as all the important bills are concerned, the government has always been accommodative.
No, we're not talking about the bills. We'll come to the bills on some other day.
As far as this particular logjam is concerned, the greatest accommodation is debate, discussion, a fair debate and discussion.
That's not the latest. That's the only thing we've been asking from the word go.
And that was what the notice Mr. Anand Sharma had issued.
Naresh Gujral, I'm going to bring you in at that point, Naresh Gujral. There is a feeling that, in fact, common ground between the two sides is simply disappearing, if it hasn't completely disappeared. And some people say maybe the time has come for someone like the President to call both opposition leaders and government leaders and knock their heads together behind closed doors. Naresh, do you think that would work?
Well, I think that is the only option, Karan. At the end of the day, we have to sit together and thrash it out. Important business of the country is being held up by this nonsensical attitude, I would call it. We have GST waiting to be enacted. We have the important bills like Whistleblowers Act, which have to be enacted. We have real estate. You know, this affects millions of people in this country. These are game-changing laws, and this would affect economy. This would create jobs in the country, and it's a shame that we are holding up the entire proceedings of the Parliament just because the opposition is adamant that the government must sack its minister without giving a chance to the accused. Now, this is not possible, and the only way out is negotiating with each other.
And therefore, you're saying perhaps the best hope is for the President to call both sides and knock their heads together. Would you repeat and confirm that's your idea as well?
Whosoever calls them, whether it's the Speaker, whether it's the Chairman of the Rajya Sabha, I don't think President can step in, but I think we need to sit together and thrash it out and work out a way forward.
In the meantime, Jayapanda, there seems to be a peculiar trade-off happening here. The position taken by the combined opposition is that tackling corruption, tackling impropriety is the most important issue of the day. The government is saying that you're doing this at the cost of pursuing growth and pursuing reform. You don't belong either to the opposition camp in that real sense, nor to the government. Is there a trade-off that you can make between these two? Or are they both equally important?
I think the problem is that both the government and many in the opposition are taking maximalist positions. Just like some in the opposition are saying that their parliament should not function unless there are resignations first. Similarly, the government is right from the beginning, even before there is any debate, saying that they will not agree to take any action or to concede anything. I think that should be left to after the debate happens. Now, regarding your question, look, if we are to take the viewpoint that development trumps everything, then we ought not to be a democracy, because there are many other models of governance where checks and balances are not required, where governments are not held accountable, and some of them have delivered good development and poverty reduction.
Okay.
But we need to balance that with other concerns that the population has, and our population is increasingly less and less tolerant of this kind of behavior in Parliament. I just want to end by saying, earlier on you cited examples from England, there are examples from other countries as well, the US for instance, where this kind of disruption used to be the norm until the middle class reached a certain size, a certain tipping point, and it is really the middle class values which are against this kind of disruptions.
Okay.
And I don't think we've reached that point yet.
Akar Patel, it's quite clear we haven't reached that point as yet. In fact, what's clear is that at this moment, the Indian people are very cynical of politics, they're very cynical of politicians as well. And there's a great fear that what's happening in Parliament is both corroborating and underlining that cynicism. Is there a danger that this sort of repeated paralysis of Parliament could lead to people losing faith in Parliament as a remedy for our problems? Are we getting anywhere down close to that situation?
If what you're saying is true, we await the opening of Parliament and the genius of Niranjan Jyoti and Giriraj Singh and Rahul Gandhi to rain down on us. I would just go back and say that I don't think this is a middle class thing. I think it's wrong to say that the poor of this country and those who are not literate see it very differently. I think that most of us would hope for a Parliament to function and that there be certain decorum. But what happens in Parliament, even when it does function, is so poor. The quality is lacking. The quality of oratory is so poor. I don't think it makes too much of a difference. I think that given the fact to assume that we can legislate our way out of trouble, whether economic or social, I think is wrong. And I think to put the entire edifice of a governance on a Parliament, I think is totally bogus.
So would you say that the confusion we are seeing, the paralysis of Parliament, is actually a reflection, as R.K. Lakshman used to once say in his cartoons, this is India, this is the way we are. Like it or not, this is the way we are.
Absolutely. I think it is a reflection of us at each level. I think a neighborhood and the street is not very different in its chaos than a Parliament. This is the normal in India.
All right, this is the normal in India, in which case the question that begs an answer, what will be the normal next week? Will it be paralysis again? Or miraculously, will Parliament start to function? My thanks to all my guests for joining me. And if you have been, thanks for watching. Goodbye. Good night.